Jack Mallers just partnered with Tether, Cantor Fitzgerald, and SoftBank to launch a new company called 21, which they are positioning as a competitor to MicroStrategy. In this video, I'm going to explain everything you need to know about both of these companies, why this could send Bitcoin to $1 million, and why many are dubbing this the Rockefeller versus Carnegie of the 21st century. Let's get into it. Now, of course, this starts with MicroStrategy, and they are pioneers who have changed finance forever. You may know that they buy Bitcoin, but there's a lot more to the story than just. Allow me to explain. This represents a share of MicroStrategy common stock. Now, in the traditional financial world, when a company issues more shares of stock, the price of the stock goes down. It's simple supply and demand. When supply increases and demand remains constant, the price will go down. But MicroStrategy has turned this idea of equity dilution completely around because what they do when they issue new shares, they buy Bitcoin. And so MicroStrategy doesn't really care about anything except increasing this. BTC over MSTR, the amount of Bitcoin per share of MicroStrategy common stock. And as long as this can increase, which it does when they dilute shares to buy Bitcoin, or issue convertible bonds to buy Bitcoin, or borrow directly to buy Bitcoin, or use their free cash flows to buy Bitcoin. Any number of these activities increases Bitcoin per outstanding share of MicroStrategy common stock, which in theory, if that metric continues to grow, should allow the common stock to outperform Bitcoin itself because each individual share's exposure to Bitcoin, while you can't actually redeem for the underlying Bitcoin, each individual share has more directional exposure, and over the long term, MicroStrategy should outperform Bitcoin, which it has done since August of 2020 when they embarked on this Bitcoin strategy. MicroStrategy has outperformed Bitcoin by a pretty significant margin. And even within the last year, throughout the 2024 bull run, we saw MicroStrategy outperform Bitcoin significantly. And so what we've seen is a plethora of quote unquote MicroStrategy copycats emerge over the last year. Semler Scientific, Metaplanet, now we've got GameStop, and now in totally out of the blue fashion, at least I had no idea this was coming, we have XXI 21, which is currently trading under their ticker $CEP, which went public through a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition corp, this week. And now this is a very big deal, and allow me to explain why. 21 is a big deal for two reasons. First, because their pure focus is on increasing Bitcoin per share. Some of these other Bitcoin treasury companies have tangential operating businesses that may cause a distraction. They're pivoting from a different line of business. Their focus may or may not be entirely on Bitcoin and Bitcoin per share. But 21, we know for a fact that that is their primary and seemingly only goal. Now, the second reason this is a big deal is, of course, the players involved, and I've got them written out here. You have Tether, which is one of the most profitable businesses on a per employee basis of the world. They're the largest dollar-backed stablecoin in the world, and pretty much all they do is users buy their stablecoin Tether. Tether takes that cash and sits in T-bills and rakes in free interest with no capital of their own, and they use that to buy Bitcoin, invest in all those sorts of companies. Great idea, fantastic business, but some people have personal reasons for not liking them. Anyways, Tether, massive player. That's a lot of free cash flow that's going to be coming in on a regular basis with a vested interest in 21. Here is Cantor, also known as Cantor Fitzgerald. And you've probably heard of them because their former CEO recently stepped down, Howard Lutnick, to join the Trump administration as the Secretary of Commerce. They are about as TradFi gets. They're one of the primary treasury dealers with the Fed. They manage hundreds of billions of dollars. Massive player, and their chairman, Brandon Lutnick, is directly involved in 21. Now, lastly is SoftBank, and they are another huge traditional financial player, hundreds of billions of dollars under management. But most importantly is this guy right here, Jack Mallers, the founder and CEO of Strike. Now, you've probably seen Jack before go on these business shows in his empty closet talking about Bitcoin, young guy, very charismatic, very articulate, and very, very knowledgeable about Bitcoin. And he understands how difficult it is to actually outperform Bitcoin. So he knows the task at hand, and there couldn't be a better mouthpiece for a project like this than Jack. All right, now let's get into the good stuff because I'm going to talk about exactly what this means for Bitcoin and should you be buying MicroStrategy or Bitcoin or 21 or any of these other Bitcoin treasury companies. We're going to break this all down for you right now. So let's imagine this here is Bitcoin and this circle is the Bitcoin price. Now take any of your Moon Boy Bitcoin price predictions, 500K, million, 10 million, how does that actually happen? Well, two things have to happen. First, investors have to decide they want to allocate capital into Bitcoin. Simple enough. Second, investors actually have to have different instruments in vehicles to do so. Allow me to explain. This is Jimmy Retail. Jimmy Retail has a modest savings of about $100,000. And let's say there's a million Jimmy Retails out in the world. That's a good amount. How much can they actually move the Bitcoin price? And how can they do so? Well, Jimmy Retail doesn't answer anyone. He runs his own financial portfolio. It's his money. He can do with it what he wants. He can buy Bitcoin and put it on a ledger and shove it under his mattress or just keep it on the exchange. He can do whatever he wants. There's no restrictions, nobody to answer to. He's young. He doesn't care about the volatility. He'll ride it up, he'll write it down, he'll do whatever. So for Jimmy Retail to get his capital from over here, we'll call this side we'll call this side TradFi, and this side over here is Bitcoin. For Jimmy Retail to get his capital over here from the traditional system into Bitcoin, it's fairly easy. Jimmy Retail can use any one of the numerous Bitcoin exchanges that have been around for multiple years, over a decade now. Coinbase, Kraken, Strike, Cash App, Swan, River, you name it. Plenty of options for Jimmy Retail to get into Bitcoin, and this has been available for a while. But things have changed recently, and Jimmy Retail is, of course, not the only player in the market. Now, this is the mom and pop family office. Now, mom and pop family office, they're not as hastily with decision making as Jimmy Retail here. Jimmy Retail can do whatever he wants, but mom and pop, they do have a fiduciary responsibility. They're a little slower to act, but they've got more capital than Jimmy Retail. One mom and pop shop is worth 100 Jimmy Retails because they manage, 5 to 10 to $20 million. Now, mom and pop, sure, they could have bought through the exchange, but that really makes it complicated. There's a lot of friction when all of their assets are in a brokerage account. But wouldn't you know it, there's Bitcoin ETFs now. So mom and pop can take their capital they manage, personal capital, whatever, anything in a brokerage account, and they can get it from the traditional financial system into Bitcoin. And wouldn't you know it, Bitcoin's market cap gets a little bit bigger. Now, mom and pop are great, but can they get Bitcoin to $1 million, to $10 million? Well, they might not be able to, but they're not the only players in town anymore. Here we have Wall Street, and this is kind of a broad catch-all term for any institution, banks, hedge funds, college endowment funds, pension funds. I'm using Wall Street as a very umbrella term, but it's not limited to New York City. Wall Street wants Bitcoin exposure. Sure, they could buy the ETFs, but Bitcoin's volatile. It goes up and down. A mid-level portfolio manager, is he really going to want to risk his nice cushy salary to invest the fund into Bitcoin and risk a 30% drawdown, ruining his quarterly numbers? Probably not. But he does, of course, want that upside exposure in his portfolio because Bitcoin is here to stay. He's heard a lot of his buddies have made great money on it. Maybe he's made good money on it personally. He understands, but is it really worth the career risk to just buy spot Bitcoin directly and expose yourself to that volatility? But spot Bitcoin or even a Bitcoin ETF are not its only options now because you have things like MicroStrategy, which offer their convertible bonds or their preferred stock. And what this does is it creates What this does is it creates a large bridge from the traditional financial system into Bitcoin. And just like the mom and pop is worth 100 Jimmy Retails, one Wall Street institution is worth 100 mom and pop shops. So that is how Bitcoin goes from decent size, 95K, to a million, 10 million. Picture each one of these rings as an order of magnitude. You don't get there without this, and you don't get the Wall Street capital without companies like MicroStrategy and now 21 offering a plethora of risk adjusted Bitcoin exposed products. And I know that was a mouthful, but think about it simply. Bitcoin goes up and down a lot. Traditional investors, they're not going to stick their neck out for that. They need something that has Bitcoin exposure, but with maybe muted exposure, but less downside volatility. They need products like that. They absolutely do. And they need custodial products. They can't just shove a ledger under their mattress. And those things are being built, and they're being built by companies like MicroStrategy and like 21. Do you understand what's happening and what is required for Bitcoin to get to $1 million? Now, let's end the video by rolling this classic Michael Saylor clip, which may prove to play itself out in the coming year.
What happens to all these wonderful models if 10 billionaires decide to buy $1 billion of Bitcoin each and announce we bought it, we're not ashamed of it, we're going to buy more? All your models are destroyed, completely devastated. Bitcoin goes to the moon.